A headless, limbless woman's torso. That is exactly what was brazenly discovered, dumped right at the construction site for the brand new Scotland Yard headquarters in the fall of 1888. I mean, think about the sheer nerve of that for a second. The killer literally dropping a dismantled body on the doorstep of London's highest police authority. This horrifying and frankly audacious discovery was the absolute peak of what became known as the Thames Torso Murders. We're looking at a meticulously calculated killing spree that operated right in the shadows of the most famous serial killer in history, Jack the Ripper. But you see, this killer didn't leave his victims in dark alleyways. He used the city's famous river as his own personal dumping ground. This explainer dives into one of the most disturbing, mysterious stories Victorian London has ever kept hidden. To truly understand this phantom killer, we absolutely have to look at his chosen dumping ground, the River Thames itself. Politician John Burns once famously called the Thames liquid history. He pointed out that while a river like the Mississippi is just muddy water, the Thames is a flowing timeline of the city's hidden past. It has seen Roman invasions, Viking raids, the whole shebang. But back in Victorian London, it wasn't just this picturesque waterway we think of today. It was essentially the city's giant garbage disposal. Anything and everything got chucked in there, and sometimes that included the absolute darkest secrets of its residents. And this perfectly illustrates the killer's escalation of terror. It all kicks off in May 1887. A lighterman working the river spots a canvas bundle floating near Raynham. He pulls it in, probably hoping it's lost goods, but instead he finds the torso of a woman. No head, no arms, no legs. About a year goes by, and the killer gets bolder, dropping that torso we talked about earlier right at the Scotland Yard construction site in the fall of 1888. And then comes the final escalation. By 1889, the torso of a pregnant woman is found right in Whitechapel, the literal heart of Jack the Ripper's territory. Right from that very first discovery at Raynham, the forensic evidence had experts completely divided. Dr. Galloway examined the remains and immediately noted that the cuts were incredibly clean and precise. To him, this pointed straight to a surgeon with an intimate, professional knowledge of human anatomy. He was saying, look, this was a dissection, not some frantic street attack. However, Dr. Thomas Bond argued a completely different profile. He asked a really great question. Who actually has more daily practical experience taking apart a body? A doctor or a butcher? A butcher or a hunter? Doctor or butcher? That was the core question that authorities just could not figure out. For years, this guy remained an absolute ghost. He left zero traces, zero clues. Until he finally made a mistake with his third victim, that pregnant woman found in Whitechapel. He had wrapped the remains in an old coat. And on that coat was a tiny, seemingly insignificant clue. A little label reading, L.E. Fisher. Now that name itself didn't instantly lead police to a suspect, but the authorities made this absolutely crucial decision to publish the clue in the newspapers. And it paid off, though in a really tragic way. The article caught the attention of a terrified woman named Catherine Jackson. Fearing the absolute worst, she came forward and ultimately identified the remains as her missing 24-year-old daughter, Elizabeth. She was able to confirm this based on specific, distinctive old scars on Elizabeth's forearm. It was a completely heartbreaking moment, but for the first and only time in this horrifying case, one of the victims wasn't just a collection of parts. She got her name back. Because that final victim was dumped in Whitechapel, right when the whole city was in a full-blown panic. The terrified public naturally started asking, wait, is the Thames Torso killer actually Jack the Ripper? But investigators knew almost immediately they were dealing with two completely different monsters, with totally opposite methods of operation. The torso killer was neat and surgical. The Ripper was messy and frenzied. The torso killer dismembered bodies off-site and moved them, leaving zero crime scene, whereas the Ripper attacked his victims right out in the open street. And when it came to the actual dismemberment, the torso killer performed precise dissections, while the Ripper left his victims terribly mutilated, but generally whole. Their signatures simply did not match up at all. Astonishingly, even the Ripper, or, well, at least someone pretending to be him, seemed to agree that this was a totally separate killer. A letter turned up during the investigation. It was highly likely faked by a reporter just trying to sell more papers, but it perfectly captured the public's understanding of these two separate sprees. The author pointed out that the surgically dismembered victims in the Thames were the work of someone else entirely, famously writing, "Not me, I'll even help you catch the guy who did it." So you have to ask, how on earth did this meticulous killer evade justice despite having multiple victims? Well, he basically leveraged what we can only call the perfect storm for a killer. First off, the police back then had no modern forensics. We're talking no DNA, no fingerprinting technology. Second, there were absolutely zero witnesses to the actual murders. Third, because he dumped the bodies in the river, there were no physical crime scenes left behind to actually investigate. Fourth, aside from Elizabeth Jackson, the victims remained entirely unidentified. And finally, the ultimate kicker, the entire city and police force were completely distracted by the whole Jack the Ripper panic. It gave this phantom the absolute perfect cover to operate completely unnoticed. And because of this incredible phantom-like ability to stay completely hidden within the fog and chaos of London, we arrive at this mind-boggling number: 0. Literally 0. That is the exact number of official suspects the police ever named in the Thames Torso Murders. Not a single person was ever seriously investigated for these horrific crimes. And then, just as quietly as it all began, it abruptly ended. In September 1889, the body parts simply stopped washing ashore. The killer vanished back into the London fog without a single trace. The terror that had totally gripped the river was just over, leaving behind absolutely nothing but cold files and missing persons reports. Which leaves us with the ultimate chilling question. Who was this Phantom of the Thames? Did he die? Was he locked up in an asylum or prison for some totally unrelated crime, or did he just simply decide to stop? Over a century later, we are still looking out at the dark waters of the Thames, wondering if the river is still keeping the identity of a respected doctor living a dark double life, or a simple butcher who just knew his way around a body. It remains one of history's great, deeply terrifying mysteries.